You're lying next to someone who loves you, you know they love you, they've said it, they've shown it, they've chosen you, repeatedly, in ways that should be enough, and you are still, somehow, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Still scanning for the moment, they figure out what they actually got, still doing the math on how long this can reasonably last before they see the thing you've been keeping just out of view. That feeling, that specific exhausting vigil, is not a relationship problem. It is a self-worth problem that has moved into your relationship and started rearranging the furniture. This video is going to show you exactly how that happens. Not in the abstract. In the specific moments you will recognize from your own life, possibly from last week. 3 things. The mechanism itself, where it shows up across every kind of relationship you have, and what it actually costs you. Not in theory, but in real moments that you don't get back. Here is what most people get wrong about self-worth and relationships. They think it shows up in the big moments, the fights, the breakups, the dramatic implosions. And sometimes it does, but the mechanism, the way low self-worth actually rewires your experience of being close to another person. It doesn't work in the big moments. It works in the small ones. It works in the 3 seconds between someone saying something kind to you and your nervous system deciding what to do with it. Someone who loves you says, "You looked incredible tonight." And for a fraction of a second, something almost lands, something warm, something close to actually believing it. Then the gap opens, and in that gap, the monitoring system activates. They're just being nice. They didn't see me from that angle. What does it mean that they usually don't say that? By the time that sequence runs, which takes about 3 seconds, the warmth is gone. What remains is a kind of low-grade audit, where there used to be a moment of genuine connection. This is the mechanism. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a quiet interception that happens before love can get all the way in. And here is what makes it so hard to see. From the outside, nothing appears to be wrong. You are in the relationship, you show up, you are kind, you do all the things that look like being present. But there is a layer of you, the part that would have to believe you are actually worth loving, that never fully arrives. The relationship happens around that layer, not through it. Now, this gap doesn't only exist in romantic relationships. That's where people tend to notice it first, because intimacy is where it's loudest. But the same mechanism is running in every significant relationship you have. In romantic relationships, it looks like hypervigilance, scanning tone of voice for signs that something has shifted, reading a text message 4 times, looking for the edge in it, apologizing before you've done anything wrong, as a kind of preemptive defense against being blamed. Feeling closer to your partner when there is distance between you, and vaguely unsafe when things are genuinely good, because good things in this system always feel temporary. In friendships, it looks like self-erasure, agreeing when you don't agree, laughing at things that aren't funny to you, never asking for what you need from the friendship because the ask itself feels like too much. Editing yourself into a version that is easier to keep around, and then quietly wondering why you feel alone, even in the company of people who care about you. In family relationships, it often looks like reversion. Something happens, a tone of voice, a particular phrase, a specific look, and suddenly you are not an adult in a complicated relationship with complicated people. You are 12 years old, and the original wound is fresh again. The work you've done on yourself evaporates in a room with the people who were there when you first learned that loving you came with conditions. And in professional relationships, in the settings where we spend most of our waking hours, it shows up as a permanent withholding of the real self. The version of you that shows up at work is competent. It performs. It delivers. But it is not the full version. The full version, the one with ideas that might be wrong, the one that doesn't already know the answer, the one that needs things, that version stays home, because being fully visible in professional settings feels, to the nervous system running this system, like a security threat. Research on self-esteem and relational functioning consistently shows that people with lower self-worth engage in what psychologists call self-protective suppression, the habitual editing of genuine thoughts, needs, and emotional states in close relationships to reduce the risk of perceived rejection. The pattern shows up across relationship types, romantic partners, friendships, family systems, and professional bonds, which is why changing it in one area of your life without addressing the root rarely holds. You are not bad at relationships. You are a person whose nervous system learned that full visibility is a risk it cannot afford, and it is executing that lesson in every room you enter. There is a specific kind of loneliness that is harder to talk about than regular loneliness. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being in a relationship. Being held, being seen, being stayed for, and still feeling, in some fundamental way, unreached. There have been people in your life who loved you. Maybe there are people right now. And some part of you, not the cynical part, not the defended part, but the quietest part, already knows that you have not fully let them. Not because you didn't want to. Because the mechanism activated before you could choose. Because love entered the gap and 3 seconds later, the audit was running, and the moment was already over. That gap has a cost, not a hypothetical one, a specific one, made of real moments that don't come back. The conversation that could have gone deeper, and didn't, because you steered it towards something safer. The time someone told you they were proud of you and you felt nothing, or worse, felt suspicious. The intimacy that was available in a moment and you were somewhere else in your head, running the monitoring system, and the moment passed. You have been paying for this with things that mattered, not just the relationship you can point to and say it didn't work out, the relationships that are still here, the ones that are working by every visible measure, and from which you are still, in some fundamental way, absent. The grief of that is real. It deserves to be called what it is. Not a character flaw, not a failure to try hard enough. Just the cost of something you've been carrying. For a long time, that was never supposed to be yours to carry alone. And here is the thing that changes when you see this clearly. Not when you have a better strategy for relationships. Not when you find a more secure partner. Not when you finally feel confident enough. The cost stops being something that happens to you. It becomes something you can see happening. And things you can see are things you can interrupt. This is not a relationship problem. It is an identity problem. And identity problems have identity solutions. If what just landed for you is more than intellectual, if you felt something shift in recognizing the specific cost named here, there is a structured 21-day process in the description, built exactly for the identity-level work this requires. Not a better version of the tactics you've already tried. The deeper thing. The link is below and in the pinned comment. Let's look now at what it actually takes to interrupt this, because here is the question that always comes next, from people who have already tried the things they were supposed to try. I've done the journaling, I've read the books. I understand everything you just said. Why is the gap still there? It's a fair question, and it deserves an honest answer. The gap persists because most of the approaches people try are aimed at the behavior downstream of the gap, not at the gap itself. Better communication skills don't close the gap. They help you manage it more gracefully. Choosing a more secure partner doesn't close the gap. It changes the texture of the relationship around the gap. Affirmations don't close the gap. They sit on the surface of a nervous system that is running a completely different program underneath. What interrupts the mechanism is something different. It is not a technique. It is a reorientation. It starts with learning to notice the gap itself. Those 3 seconds between receiving and letting in as information rather than as proof. When the audit activates after someone says something kind to you, that is not evidence that they're wrong. That is evidence that the mechanism is running. Those are different things. And recognizing the difference, even once, even partially, is the first time you are relating to the pattern rather than from inside it. This is slow work. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not respecting your intelligence. The identity that learned to protect itself by staying partially hidden did not form in a weekend. It will not dissolve in one, but the research on this is actually clear in a way that is useful. The shift is not from insecure to secure in a single movement. It is a series of smaller interruptions, moments where the gap opens, and you notice it, and you make a slightly different choice about what the gap means. Over time, that changes the identity, not by performing confidence you don't feel, by accumulating evidence that the world, and the people in it, do not always confirm the original verdict. You were not born believing you were too much to be fully loved. That was taught, and the part of you that learned to protect itself this way was not making a mistake. It was making the only safe choice available at the time. The question now is whether that choice still serves you, or whether you are ready to find out what happens when you let more of yourself arrive. Which relationship in your life has felt the most affected by this? And what do you think it would change if the gap actually closed? If this opens something you want to go further with, the 21-day process in the description is built for exactly this. The identity level work that actually closes the gap, rather than managing it from the outside. Link is in the description and pinned below. There are moments you didn't fully receive. Love that arrived and got stopped at the door before it could get all the way in. Connection that was available. Genuinely available. And you were somewhere else in your head, running the system that was built to keep you safe. That is a real loss. Not a dramatic one. Not the kind anyone sees or names or mourns with you. But real. It deserves to be called what it is, not a failure. Not evidence that you are constitutionally unable to be loved correctly. Just the cost of something that was taught to you before you had any say in the matter. A monitoring system that ran so well for so long that you stopped noticing it was running. You notice it now. That is not nothing. It is, in fact, the beginning of the only thing that actually works. Not a better technique, not a more compatible partner, not a more confident performance of a self you're not sure you have yet. The beginning is this: seeing the mechanism clearly enough to know that the gap between receiving love and letting it in is not proof of what you are. It is proof of what you learned. And what was learned can be unlearned. Not overnight. Not without the kind of work that feels uncomfortable before it feels like anything else. But the person who could walk into a relationship and let themselves be fully arrived, not performing security, not managing the audit, not waiting for the other shoe, that person is not a fantasy version of you. They are the returned version. The one who existed before the lesson landed. The one who has been waiting quietly, patiently, on the other side of the gap. You are closer than you think. That is not reassurance. That is what the evidence says.